Hey, Quicksters, welcome to Quick Take. I'm Susie along with James. How are you, James?
I'm great. I'm great. We are doing a special session today. I am at Google here in Mountain View for a conference,
Ooh,
doing some interesting conversations around some of the technology they're bringing to the table. And I thought it
cool.
would be very applicable for us to have a conversation from here today.
Nice, nice. You're too cool for me today. I'm just saying.
Well, it is pretty palatial here. I'm trying to figure out how to steal a bike, but they frown on that. So um,
Be the first one. I give you
I
permission.
I'm 90% sure I would not be the first person to steal a Google bike, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay. All right. So, as I always have content that we can chat about,
Yeah.
I actually had a friend of mine who's a coach that is
Hmm.
an executive coach, and she called me yesterday because she said, I need some advice from you for one of my clients, which was super interesting to me.
Yeah.
So, the scenario was her client, this guy, is a VP level, just for context, and he is having an issue with his boss. And one of the things that it's all around recognition. He feels like he's kind of invisible. And a great example of this was he wanted to do this pitch to a new client, which is totally in scope with his role and
Hmm.
responsibility. And so he went to his boss and said, I'd like to be the one that is the front for
Yeah.
the
Very
pitch
good.
this
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And the boss said, actually, Ron's better at it than you. So we're going to let Ron do it.
Ouch. Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a tough one to come back from for sure.
Yeah. And so what he does is his thing is he just says okay,
Oh
because
yeah.
he
Yeah.
all her the coach told me he's very conflict avoidant. He doesn't want to bring it up, but
Yeah.
he feels like invisible. He doesn't know what to do.
Yeah. And that's pretty common. I think people's reaction to those things is to get small and to hide.
Hmm.
So I can see that being a problem. Boy, that's really tough. But not terribly uncommon. I think there's
Oh,
varying
so
degrees of it where
sad.
you're you can either be very hidden, like this particular case, or it could be either a subconscious or a uh, subtlety that your boss is. You can find that when you do the math. Hey, you know what? Rob does get all the opportunities to present, and so yeah,
Yeah.
there's you can come to a realization that you don't have the visibility you'd like, and there's some I think some good tricks that you can bring to the table to address that.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see what your tips are because one thing that I talk a lot about is your internal influence. I know I'm not going to
Hmm.
take stuff away from you, but your internal influence and what that quotient is, and do you have influence to make things
Oh, sure.
happen? And when you do, how do you advocate for yourself?
Yep. Yep.
How do you advocate for your development? And
Hmm.
what do you do
Hmm.
when you hit a
Hmm.
brick wall? So
Yep.
I'm your student here. I can't wait to hear what you say. So what are your tips?
The first one comes to mind here being in the Valley this week. Um, you know, in Charles Sandberg's book, talking about leaning in, her obvious book by that title. She was very particular about the concept of sitting at the table, and I think so often a lot of the issues with you not being particularly perceived correctly or you not being perceived as part of the conversation is your confidence. And
Hmm.
I think that to address that as a human, it's not something you can just to say today I'm going to be better at this. It's about building that framework for yourself and building the reputation for yourself within your workplace, your personal life, wherever that is. And I really love the first step is changing your physical approach towards things. She talked about sitting at the table, finding a place to sit that was strategic and important, and putting yourself there. Now, you can do that with elbows and punching and pushing people out of the way. That's not how the real world works. But you can get to the room early. You can choose the seat that is next to the executive in charge. Actively putting yourself in a place so you consciously and subconsciously are presenting a good forward. Uh, what am I trying to say there? You're being seen as somebody that's important,
Yeah.
and then you don't feel like you have to work as hard to be part of the discussion.
Yeah.
It's very difficult when you're in the back row, you're up against the wall, trying to show that you're a player. And if your reputation or your confidence isn't there, then don't try to hurdle that additional challenge. Put yourself in a place, sit at the table, do something physical that allows you to be more engaged.
I like that a lot. And what comes to mind for me is not just show up, be seen. And
Hmm.
how do you
Hmm.
do that? And I think another just point on what you said is we get so used to our habits and we all tend to sit in the same place at staff meetings. We
Oh
tend to
gosh,
sit
yeah.
in the
Oh my
same place
gosh.
in meetings.
Yes.
And even disrupting that, because everybody has their habits, it
Mm-hmm.
will create this forced way of looking at you differently. And they
Right.
won't
Right.
notice it. They might go, "You're sitting in a different place." And you could say,
Yep.
"Absolutely.
Why not?
I'm a new person today. I'm different than I
Sure.
was yesterday. So this is a new day." So I like that
Yep.
idea.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I think it is both. I think it's achievable too. For those of our listeners who are kind of struggling with that and don't really have the confidence or the skills, and we're not talking about the confidence required to jump out of an airplane, and this is a challenge for junior executives and board members that sometimes they're not feeling like they're getting the respect they deserve. Step one: change your physical environment, sit at the table, take that step. It makes a big difference.
And I will say, because I remember having to do this. I remember
Yeah,
sitting on the outside
yeah,
perimeter, and
I
and
know that.
my
I remember the
executive
conference room.
coach. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can picture it.
yeah.
And the first time I did it, it felt uncomfortable. But the
Sure.
second time
It
and the
was
third
easy.
time, it was just like,
Hmm.
and everybody might go, "Oh, that's funny. She's sitting there. She must be taking a stance." But the next time, they didn't think that.
That's right. And I
Hmm.
think that's a great segue into the second piece of advice that I'm give is to create a network that supports you in that effort. Because what
Hmm.
will end up happening invariably is you will end up sitting in the back of the room. You will not be sitting in the meeting. And those people who are your advocates will move and say, "Hey, Susie, you should be sitting at the table," or "Why aren't you sitting up here?
Yeah.
You need to be here." And having that kind of champion, having that somebody that speaks for you and honestly holds you accountable to what you're trying to accomplish goes a long way.
Hmm. Yeah, I thought you were saying more. Yes, I totally agree with you in having somebody to give you that push, and helping you see yourself outside of yourself,
Right.
so
Yep.
that they can give you that perspective. And it's funny, but when somebody tells you, it almost when somebody does that for me, it gives me permission to do it. So
Yeah,
whatever
I
you
love
need to
that. I
trick
love that.
yourself into it
Hmm.
is what you need to use. That's a good one.
Yeah, and I think when you look at or you hear executives speak or politicians speak, and they have honest moments, and they're not trying to point out that they are a self-made, individually curated, magical man or woman, they will point out the fact that they are there based on the support and growth of others who
Yeah.
have promoted them and pushed them to be better and have advocated for them when they're not in the room.
Yep.
And that's how it happens. And so to put yourself in a situation where you have people that are supporting you, it's very, very big.
It is very important. All right, what's your third one?
The third one is to actually change the narrative. So often, people who have setbacks look at those as roadblocks. One of our favorite leaders, yours and mine, has often been quoted saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think when you have a setback, you need to reframe that as an opportunity. So
Yeah.
in your example, where that individual leader was perhaps not allowed to speak, maybe you can't fight that battle at that moment, but you can say, "Hey, you know what? I know that the last one presentation didn't go so
Yeah.
well, but I just I'd let you know that I actually went off and took some speech, some coaching. I did a speech class, and I actually did
Yeah.
join Toastmasters. So that crisis, that stumble, use that as an opportunity to show that you are willing to go that extra mile."
Yeah.
And I think that so often we look at those things as don't look at those things as ways to highlight your willingness to grow and improve.
Yeah. And make sure you reframe that always in a way that's a
Hmm.
positive development for you, and
Oh, for
don't
sure, for sure.
don't
Right.
don't fall on the sword and say, "I know I
Hmm.
don't do this very well." Really talk about the forward movement. And that one of the things that I told this woman to tell her client too is have her go back to the boss and say and reframe it for them, especially with the next
Oh
opportunity, and
yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah.
"I know you had said that." I don't remember. Oh, Ron was better at presenting, but I've been
Hmm.
really working on this, and I know that you said that this was something I need to work on. So I want this opportunity
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you have told me you want to see me develop.
yeah.
So reframe it
See,
in their words.
and it can't be any better than that, right? You're actually
Yeah.
you're addressing the situation. You're highlighting the fact that you're listening. I think there are just such great opportunities to do that, and oftentimes people just miss them. So I think it's super critical, and I think that people need to remember that that's a good way for you to again show up and be seen.
And I think it's, and here's the bonus one. I think that's always something before you're going to any senior leader is how am I going to frame this up to them? How am I going to
Yes,
frame this in a
yes.
way that they're going to be able to say yes? Because if you frame it from your view, and you've done this
Hmm.
to me, I've asked you to read an email for me, and
Yeah.
you said, okay, but when you write it, don't write it from your perspective, write it as
Right,
this
from their
persona.
perspective. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And so I think that's really important to think about what's important to them, because
Hmm.
if this person would have framed it differently and in the very onset, I think that the response wouldn't have been as easy for that boss to say no.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think when leaders come to the table with those challenges, it's like, how do I get to the place where,
Mm-hmm.
I want people to be seen as somebody who is growing and
Yep.
changing, and
Growing and
growing
changing.
and changing makes me laugh.
Fifth grade.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all
Okay.
of our parent listeners know exactly where that came from. Changing and growing, how about that? Or evolving. We're already down the rabbit hole there. But I think you want to highlight your willingness to adjust, and I think that's super critical.
Yes. Okay, big man on campus. Bring us back around. What are those 3 tips?
First, number one, change the way that you show up physically.
Mm-hmm.
Find a seat at the table. Put
Yeah.
yourself in a position that is actually to be seen, and whether that's even on remote,
I was going to say,
you know,
turn your camera
turn your
on.
camera on. I
Yes.
can't say that enough. And I think have a background that is professional and
Yeah.
looks like you are a professional. Just because you don't have to wear a sport coat to work doesn't mean you should look like you're wearing pajamas. See the previous 3 episodes of this podcast regarding professionalism. That's number one. Number two, obviously you need to what was number two? Now I can't remember what number two was.
Uh, oh no, not good. It was the seat at the table, and then it
Yeah.
was have a sponsor. That
Oh,
was 2,
that's right.
wasn't it?
Sponsors. You
Sponsor.
need to see. You are
I
my
was
way to
listening.
way to help me there. See, I needed support from somebody, and there was Susie
I
to help
had your
me. So
back.
she
Let's
had my
let the
back.
record
So
show I
let
had James Cap's back.
always have my back. Number one, sit at the table, show up. Number two, create a group of people who will support you and save you a seat at the table. And three, obviously, you want to be able to take advantage. Realize that those setbacks may be something you could take advantage of, and grow from those. So
And
um,
reframe it for your audience around you.
reframe it for
Yep.
your audience. I think is huge. That's a great one.
Love it as always. Thanks, James.
Oh, loving it. See you.